Martin Charles Scorsese is an American film director, screenwriter and producer, whose career spans more than 50 years. One of the major figures of the new Hollywood era, he is widely regarded as one of the most significant and influential directors in film history. Scorsese's body of work explores themes such as Italian-American identity, Catholic concepts of guilt and redemption, faith, machismo, crime and tribalism. Many of his films are known for their depiction of violence, and the liberal use of profanity and rock music. In 1990, he founded the Film Foundation, a non-profit organization dedicated to film preservation, and in 2007 he founded the World Cinema Foundation. He is a recipient of the AFI Life Achievement Award for his contributions to the cinema, and has won an Academy Award, a Palme d'Or, Cannes Film Festival Best Director Award, Silver Lion, Grammy Award, Emmys, Golden Globes, BAFTAs, and Directors Guild of America Awards.
He has established a filmmaking history involving repeat collaborations with actors and film technicians, including 9 films made with Robert De Niro. His films with De Niro are the vigilante thriller Taxi Driver, the biographical sports drama Raging Bull, the black comedy The King of Comedy, the musical drama New York, New York, the psychological thriller Cape Fear, and the crime films Mean Streets, Goodfellas, Casino, and The Irishman. Scorsese has also been noted for his successful collaborations with actor Leonardo DiCaprio, having directed him in 5 films: the historical epic Gangs of New York, the Howard Hughes biography The Aviator, the crime thriller The Departed, the psychological thriller Shutter Island, and the Wall Street satire The Wolf of Wall Street. The Departed won Scorsese the Academy Award for Best Director, in addition to winning the award for Best Picture.
Scorsese's other film work includes the black comedy After Hours, the romantic drama The Age of Innocence, the historical adventure drama Hugo, and the religious epics The Last Temptation of Christ and Silence. His work in television includes the pilot episodes of the HBO series Boardwalk Empire and Vinyl, which he also co-created.
With 9 Academy Award for Best Director nominations, he is the most nominated living director and is second only to William Wyler's 12 nominations overall. As a fan of rock music, he has directed several documentaries on the subject, including The Last Waltz, No Direction Home, Shine a Light, George Harrison, Living in the Material World, and Rolling Thunder Revue, a Bob Dylan story by Martin Scorsese.
Martin Scorsese was born on November 17, 1942, in the Flushing area of New York City's Queensboro. His family moved to Little Italy in Manhattan before he started school. Both of Scorsese's parents, Charles Scorsese and Catherine Scorsese, worked in New York's garment district. Charles was a clothes presser and an actor, while Catherine was a seamstress and an actress. His paternal grandparents emigrated from Polizzi Generosa, while his maternal grandparents emigrated from Samina, both in the province of Palermo, Sicily. Scorsese was raised in a predominantly Catholic environment. As a boy, he had asthma and could not play sports or take part in any activities with other children, so his parents and his older brother would often take him to movie theaters. It was at this stage in his life that he developed a passion for cinema. As a teenager in the Bronx, Scorsese frequently rented Powell and Pressburger's The Tales of Hoffman from a store that had one copy of the reel. Scorsese was one of only 2 people who regularly rented it. The other was future film director George Romero.
Scorsese has cited Sabu and Victor Mature as his favorite actors during his youth. He has also spoken of the influence of the 1947-48 Powell and Pressburger films Black Narcissus and The Red Shoes, whose innovative techniques later impacted his filmmaking. In his documentary titled A Personal Journey with Martin Scorsese Through American Movies, Scorsese said that he was enamored of historical epics in his adolescence, and at least 2 films of the genre, Land of the Pharaohs and El Cid, appear to have had a deep and lasting impact on his cinematic psyche. Scorsese also developed an admiration for neo-realist cinema at this time. He recounted its influence in a documentary on Italian neo-realism, and commented on how bicycle thieves, Rome, Open City, and especially Pisa inspired him and influenced his viewer portrayal of his Sicilian roots. In his documentary, Il mio viaggio in Italia, Scorsese noted that the Sicilian episode of Roberto Rossellini's Pisa, which he first saw on television with his relatives who were themselves Sicilian immigrants, had a significant impact on his life. He acknowledges owing a great debt to the French New Wave and has stated that the French New Wave has influenced all filmmakers who have worked since, whether they saw the films or not. He has also cited filmmakers including Satyajit Ray, Ingmar Bergman, Michelangelo Antonioni, and Federico Fellini as major influences on his career. He attended Cardinal Hayes High School in the Bronx. He had initially desired to become a priest, attending a preparatory seminary but failed after the first year. This gave way to cinema and consequently Scorsese enrolled in NYU's Washington Square College, where he earned a BA in English in 1964. He went on to earn his MFA, film, from New York University's School of the Arts in 1968, a year after the school was founded.
While attending the Tisch School of the Arts, Scorsese made the short films What's a Nice Girl Like You Doing in a Place Like This? And It's Not Just You, Murray. His most famous short of the period is the darkly comic The Big Shave, which features Peter Bermuth. The film is an indictment of America's involvement in Vietnam, suggested by its alternative title Viet 67. Scorsese has mentioned on several occasions that he was greatly inspired in his early days at New York University by film professor Haig P. Menuhin. In 1965, Scorsese married his first wife Lorraine Marie Brennan, and they remained together for 6 years between 1965 and 1971. They have a daughter, Catherine, who was named after his mother. Following their divorce in 1972, Scorsese has had 5 wives and identifies himself as a lapsed Roman Catholic as a result of the Church's doctrinal position against divorce. As Scorsese has commented, "I'm a lapsed Catholic. But I am Roman Catholic, there's no way out of it."
In 1967, Scorsese made his first feature-length film, The Black and White I Call First, which was later retitled Who's That Knocking at My Door?, with his fellow students actor Harvey Keitel and editor Thelma Schoonmaker, both of whom were to become long-term collaborators. This film was intended to be the first of Scorsese's semi-autobiographical J.R. trilogy, which would have included a later film, Mean Streets. Throughout his career, Scorsese has avoided comparing his own films to those of other filmmakers whom he considers to be his contemporaries after 1967 when his own career in films began. The single exception is Kubrick's 1968 film 2001, A Space Odyssey.
Scorsese became friends with the influential movie brats of the 1970s, Brian De Palma, Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. It was De Palma who introduced Scorsese to Robert De Niro. During this period, Scorsese worked as the assistant director and one of the editors on the documentary Woodstock and met actor-director John Cassavetes, who became a close friend and mentor. In 1972, Scorsese made the Depression-era exploiter Boxcar Bertha for B-movie producer Roger Corman, who also helped directors such as Francis Ford Coppola, James Cameron, and John Sayles launch their careers. It was Corman who taught Scorsese that entertaining films could be shot with very little money or time, preparing the young director well for the challenges to come with Mean Streets. Following the film's release, Cassavetes encouraged Scorsese to make the films that he wanted to make, rather than someone else's projects.
Championed by influential film critic Pauline Kael, Mean Streets was a breakthrough for Scorsese, De Niro, and Keitel. By now the signature Scorsese style was in place: macho posturing, bloody violence, Catholic guilt and redemption, gritty New York locale, rapid-fire editing and a soundtrack with contemporary music. Although the film was innovative, its wired atmosphere, edgy documentary style, and gritty street-level direction owed a debt to directors Cassavetes, Samuel Fuller, and early Jean-Luc Godard. In 1974, actress Ellen Burstyn chose Scorsese to direct her in Alice Doesn't Live Here Anymore, for which she won an Academy Award for Best Actress. Although well regarded, The film remains an anomaly in the director's early career as it focuses on a central female character. Returning to Little Italy to explore his ethnic roots, Scorsese next came up with Italian American, a documentary featuring his parents Charles and Catherine Scorsese.
Taxi Driver followed in 1976, Scorsese's dark, urban nightmare of one lonely man's gradual descent into insanity. The film established him as an accomplished filmmaker and also brought attention to cinematographer Michael Chapman, whose style tends towards high contrasts, strong colors, and complex camera movements. The film starred Robert De Niro as the troubled and psychotic Travis Bickle. The film co-starred Jodie Foster in a highly controversial role as an underage prostitute, and Harvey Keitel as her pimp, Matthew, called Sport. Taxi Driver also marked the start of a series of collaborations between Scorsese and writer Paul Schrader, whose influences included The Diary of Would-Be Assassin Arthur Bramer and Pickpocket, a film by the French director Robert Bresson. Writer-director Schrader often returns to Bresson's work in films such as American Gigolo, Light Sleeper, and Scorsese's later Bringing Out the Dead. Already controversial upon its release, Taxi Driver hit the headlines again 5 years later, when John Hinckley Jr. made an assassination attempt on then-President Ronald Reagan. He subsequently blamed his act on his obsession with Jodie Foster's Taxi Driver character.
Taxi Driver won the Palme d'Or at the 1976 Cannes Film Festival, also receiving 4 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture. In 1976, Scorsese married the writer Julia Cameron, his second marriage. They have a daughter, but the marriage lasted only a year. The divorce was acrimonious and served as the basis of Cameron's first feature, the dark comedy God's Will, which also starred their daughter, Domenica. She had a small role in Cape Fear using the name Domenica Scorsese and has continued to act, write, direct, and produce.
The critical and financial success of Taxi Driver encouraged Scorsese to move ahead with his first big-budget project, the highly stylized musical New York, New York. This tribute to Scorsese's hometown and the classic Hollywood musical was a box office failure. The film was the director's third collaboration with Robert De Niro, co-starring with Liza Minnelli. The film is best remembered today for the title theme song, which was popularized by Frank Sinatra. Although possessing Scorsese's usual visual panache and stylistic bravura, many critics felt its enclosed studio-bound atmosphere left it leaden in comparison with his earlier work. Despite its weak reception, the film is regarded positively by some critics. Richard Brody in The New Yorker wrote, "MW parser output.template quote, overflow hidden, margin 1M0, padding 0. 40px, .mw parser output.template quote.template quote exit, line height 1.5m, text align left, padding left 1.6m, margin top 0.
For Scorsese, a lifelong cinephile, the essence of New York could be found in its depiction in classic Hollywood movies. Remarkably, his backward-looking tribute to the golden age of musicals and noirish romantic melodramas turned out to be one of his most freewheeling and personal films.
By several accounts, Robert De Niro practically saved Scorsese's life when he persuaded him to kick his cocaine addiction to make his highly regarded film Raging Bull. Writing for The New Yorker in March 2000, Mark Singer summarized Scorsese's condition stating,
Convinced that he would never make another movie, he poured his energies into making this violent biopic of middleweight boxing champion Jake LaMotta, calling it a kamikaze method of filmmaking. The film is widely viewed as a masterpiece and was voted the greatest film of the 1980s by Britain's Sight and Sound magazine. It received 8 Oscar nominations, including Best Picture, Best Actor for Robert De Niro and Scorsese's first for Best Director. De Niro won, as did Thelma Schoonmaker for editing, but Best Director went to Robert Redford for Ordinary People. From this work onwards, Scorsese's films are always labeled as a Martin Scorsese picture on promotional material. Raging Bull, filmed in high-contrast black and white, is where Scorsese's style reached its zenith. Taxi Driver and New York, New York had used elements of expressionism to replicate psychological points of view, but here the style was taken to new extremes. employing extensive slow motion, complex tracking shots, and extravagant distortion of perspective. Thematically too, the concerns carried on from Mean Streets and Taxi Driver, insecure males, violence, guilt, and redemption.
Although the screenplay for Raging Bull was credited to Paul Schrader and Mardik Martin, the finished script differed extensively from Schrader's original draft. It was rewritten several times by various writers including Jay Cox. The final draft was largely written by Scorsese and Robert De Niro. The American Film Institute chose Raging Bull as the #1 American sports film on their list of the top 10 sports films. In 1997, the Institute ranked Raging Bull as the 24th greatest film of all time on their AFI's 100 Years 100 Movies list. In 2007, they ranked Raging Bull as the 4th greatest film of all time on their AFI's 100 Years 100 Movies list.
Scorsese's next project was his 5th collaboration with Robert De Niro, the king of comedy. It is a satire on the world of media and celebrity, whose central character is a troubled loner who ironically becomes famous through a criminal act. The film was an obvious departure from the more emotionally committed films he had become associated with. Visually, it was far less kinetic than the style Scorsese had developed previously, often using a static camera and long takes. Here the expressionism of his previous work gave way to moments of almost total surrealism. It still bore many of Scorsese's trademarks, however. The King of Comedy failed at the box office, but has become increasingly well regarded by critics in the years since its release. German director Wim Wenders numbered it among his 15 favorite films. Also, in 1983, Scorsese made a brief cameo appearance in the film Anna Pavlova, originally intended to be directed by one of his heroes, Michael Powell. This led to a more significant acting appearance in Bertrand Tavernier's jazz film Round Midnight. He also made a brief venture into television, directing an episode of Steven Spielberg's Amazing Stories.
With After Hours, Scorsese made an aesthetic shift back to a pared-down, almost underground filmmaking style. Filmed on an extremely low budget, on location, and at night in the Soho neighborhood of Manhattan, the film is a black comedy about one increasingly misfortunate night for a mild New York word processor and features cameos by such disparate actors as Terry Garr and Cheech and Chong. Along with the 1987 Michael Jackson music video Bad, in 1986 Scorsese made The Color of Money, a sequel to the much-admired Robert Rossen film The Hustler with Paul Newman, which co-starred Tom Cruise. Although adhering to Scorsese's established style, The Color of Money was the director's first official foray into mainstream filmmaking. The film finally won actor Paul Newman an Oscar and gave Scorsese the clout to finally secure backing for a project that had been a long-time goal for him, The Last Temptation of Christ.
In 1983, Scorsese began work on this long-cherished personal project. The Last Temptation of Christ, based on the 1951 novel written by Nikos Kazantzakis, retold the life of Christ in human rather than divine terms. Barbara Hershey recalls introducing Scorsese to the book while they were filming Boxcar Bertha. The film was slated to shoot under the Paramount Pictures banner, but shortly before principal photography was to start, Paramount pulled the plug on the project, citing pressure from religious groups. In this aborted 1983 version, Aidan Quinn was cast as Jesus, and Sting was cast as Pontius Pilate. However, following his mid-1980s flirtation with commercial Hollywood, Scorsese made a major return to personal filmmaking with the project, which was ultimately released in 1988. Even prior to its release, the film caused a massive furor, with worldwide protests against its perceived blasphemy effectively turning a low-budget independent film into a media sensation. Most of the controversy centered on the final passages of the film, which depicted Christ marrying and raising a family with Mary Magdalene in a Satan-induced hallucination while on the cross.
Looking past the controversy, The Last Temptation of Christ gained critical acclaim and remains an important work in Scorsese's canon, an explicit attempt to wrestle with the spirituality underpinning his films up until that point. The director went on to receive his second nomination for a Best Director Academy Award. Scorsese then married producer Barbara DeFina in 1985, his third of 5 marriages, Their marriage ended in divorce in 1991. As a separate film project, and along with directors Woody Allen and Francis Ford Coppola in 1989, Scorsese provided one of 3 segments in the portmanteau film New York Stories, called Life Lessons.
After a decade of mostly mixed results, Scorsese's gangster epic Goodfellas was considered his return to directorial form, and his most confident and fully realized film since Raging Bull. De Niro and Joe Pesci offered a virtuoso display of Scorsese's bravura cinematic technique in the film and re-established, enhanced, and consolidated his reputation. After the film was released, Roger Ebert, a friend and supporter of Scorsese, named Goodfellas the best mob movie ever. It is ranked No. 1 on Ebert's movie list for 1990, along with those of Gene Siskel and Peter Travers, and is widely considered one of the director's greatest achievements. The film was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Picture and Best Director, and Scorsese earned his 3rd Best Director nomination but again lost to a first-time director, Kevin Costner. Joe Pesci earned the Academy Award for Best Supporting Actor for his performance. Scorsese and the film also won a number of other awards, including 5 BAFTA Awards, a Silver Lion and more. The American Film Institute placed Goodfellas at No. 94 on the AFI's 100 Years 100 Movies list. On the 2007 updated version, they moved Goodfellas up to No. 92 on the AFI's 100 Years 100 Movies list and put Goodfellas at No. 2 on their list of the top 10 gangster films.
Thank you for watching. Please subscribe.